right, 25 minutes before 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. You know, I didn't live through World War II. I was born about 10 years after it was over, and maybe that's why I, for some reason, look back at that era as a romantic era, and if you lived through it, you might be thinking either it was romantic or it was like one of the worst times you ever lived through. I don't really know. There's a song that is from that era called The White Cliffs of Dover.
Yep.
And in that song, there is a line, and it says, "Tomorrow, when the world is free, the shepherd will tend his sheep, the valley will bloom again, and Jimmy will go to sleep in his own little room again."
I love this song.
I always just thought that was the best line. Jimmy will go to sleep in his own little room again. I remember my dad, who has since passed away, was a World War II vet, as most of our listeners know. And this song came up one time in conversation, and he was basically saying that the line is reference to the fact that in Britain, during the war, the children often weren't sleeping in their own beds because they had to be in shelters throughout that time. So it gave me a little bit of an idea of where that song came from and why it's such a touching. I mean, it's such a when the world is full of hate and there are wars going on to try to do something about that hatred. There's something about it. I don't know why, but there's something romantic. Maybe because people come together during that time. I don't know. Our next guest has done more than write a great novel. He has written a novel that will teach you history somewhat.
Yeah.
I'm not a great history student, but I'm a better history student when the history is somehow snuck into a story.
Yeah. It's a wonderful book.
James MacManus is on the phone. I hope I'm saying his name right. His book is outstanding. It's called Sleep in Peace Tonight. James is the managing director of the Times Literary Supplement in London. He worked as a foreign correspondent in France, Africa, and the Middle East. His novel Ocean Devil made into a movie under the title of The Children of Huang Shi. Did I say that right? He is an historian, which I could have guessed that just from the book itself. And he's an award-winning author. This book is one you will want. It's called Sleep in Peace Tonight. Let's speak to the author, James MacManus. Good morning, James.
Good morning to you.
Where are you? Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from New York City.
Oh, okay. All right. You got that New York accent. I can hear it.
I don't think so.
No, I'm teasing. Yeah, you have done a wonderful job. And I'm not a good history student, but I am when it's interesting. And it's always interesting to me. Call me wimpy or whatever, but I like when there's a romance mixed in. I don't know why.
Well, I think that's what most readers do. But what I set out to do in this book is write a historical novel and stay as true to the history as possible.
Yeah.
And as you know, this is about a man I regard as a forgotten hero of World War II, Harry Hopkins. Certainly, we've forgotten him about him in Britain, and we owe him a huge debt. Because, as the book tells us, Hopkins was the man sent by Roosevelt to Churchill at the height of the Blitz in London, and at a time in January 1941 when we were really facing defeat at the hands of the Nazis. And it was Hopkins who was the architect of the relationship between Churchill and Roosevelt. And these two great war leaders did not like each other at the outset of the conflict. In fact, Roosevelt had gone on the record in the 20s as calling Churchill a stinker because they had clashed when they first met in the First World War. So Hopkins was the man who had to make the relationship work, and he did. And it was on that relationship that the wartime and the war-winning alliance between the two countries depended.
So how did you put the two together? How did you discover Harry Hopkins and grasp the important role that he played? How did that happen for you?
I was very lucky at St Andrews University in Scotland to have an American tutor. He was from Texas. And it was he who told me about Harry Hopkins and the extraordinary role that Hopkins played in the Second World War. And it was he who said to me that in America, Hopkins had largely been forgotten. And certainly that was the case in the UK. And together we learned an awful lot about what Hopkins did. Now, one of the points made to me by my tutor was that Hopkins was a deeply unpopular character in Washington. He was an unelected outsider. He lived in the White House. He had unrivaled access to President Roosevelt. And he was hated by the Republicans for his role in the New Deal with implementing radical policies, and deeply distrusted by the Democrats because of his access to the president. So this man was not a natural envoy to Britain in 1941, and his background made him even less of a natural choice. He was a small-town boy from the Corn Belt who had no time when he grew up for the Brits or their empire and all that sort of stuff. So his arrival in January the 9th, 1941, was when Churchill heard he was coming, he simply said, "Who?" No one had ever heard of him in London.
The parts of the book that make it a novel could have been replaced by the information you had historically. Why did you choose to create a novel?
Because I wanted to dig deep into Hopkins and kind of find out the inner man. Now, I also wanted to create a character in the book, the character of London itself. And this was a city battered nightly by German bombs in which 40,000 people died in exactly 8 months from 1840 to 41. Mm. And every morning this city would shake off the debris and douse the flames and get back to work. And reading diaries and letters from the period, among them I may say those of my own parents, it's striking to see how alive people felt amongst the carnage around them. And over and again, one reads that people felt they had something to live for because they had something to fight for. And they had something else going on in London, too, and Hopkins picked up on this. Social morals crumbled as Londoners lived as if there was no tomorrow. And as I said, for 40,000 of them, there was no tomorrow. So lightning affairs in the blackout, quick flings between strangers, love, lust, and betrayal all gave Londoners some solace in the dark nights when the city literally crumbled around them. And that's the sort of a backdrop to the story. But when Hopkins got to London, he was immediately attracted to the courage that he saw around him, and this sort of atmosphere that he found of hedonism.
And that is really a testament to the people in England, because they weren't putting out the words stating, oh, woe is me, the U.S. needs to come in and save us. All they wanted was the tools to help themselves, because at that point, the United States did not want to go into the war or help.
You're absolutely right. Public opinion in America was by a vast majority against any aid to Britain, and particularly against any idea that Roosevelt should send forces across the Atlantic. And Roosevelt knew it, and Hopkins knew it too. But Hopkins worked harder and lobbied longer than anyone else in Washington in 1941 to get supplies and aid to the British, and the Lend-Lease legislation did begin to do that. But just to return to the point about this being a novel,
right.
I wanted to give Hopkins to create for him a love affair, and Churchill did indeed give him a very attractive woman driver, and she drove him all over the country. So I think it's quite reasonable in the circumstances that he had an affair with her. That's what happens in the novel anyway.
Do we know who the driver is? I mean, is she still around?
No, long gone.
No. It'd be interesting if you hit on something that was actually true, because I'm with you. It rings true. It would make sense.
I think in the period, yes. And Hopkins was a bit of a playboy. He would have...
then definitely.
He had an eye for the ladies.
Then definitely. Wow, I am so fascinated by this story. I want to know more. We're almost up against the break. You probably can tell by the way I'm kind of rushing through until we get to that break. But when we come back, we'll continue our conversation. I guess I want to know something to think about during the break. When Hopkins was doing the things he was doing that essentially brought the two countries together so that the war could be won on our side. Was there any ulterior motive for him? Was there any personal, or was he did he understand the bigger picture and the need for it? We'll be right back to continue this. The book, again, is called Sleep in Peace Tonight. It is an historic novel. It is written by our guest, James MacManus. We'll be right back.
The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Safe boating is no accident. A nice day today. Sunshine mixed with clouds, the high 79 to 83. And partly cloudy skies tonight, lows ranging from 63 to 70 along the coast. Tomorrow, partly sunny and warm with a high of 82 to 86. And on Wednesday, partly sunny, very warm and more humid, high 84 to 88. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Joe Lundberg.
may have missed on the John Tesh Radio Show.
Talking about ourselves stimulates the brain the same way love, food, and cash do. Everybody's favorite subject is themselves. So, on a date, ask her about herself. Adults studying a new language learn words and phrases faster when they sing them. Normal, happy cows produce about 9 gallons of milk a day. But super relaxed and happy cows produce more than 10 gallons.
Intelligence for your life on the John Tesh Radio Show. Don't miss this stuff.
Hi, I'm Yvette, and I'm here to tell you a few things about ABC Frederick's Appliance. They sell not only new, but used guaranteed appliances. When you call ABC Frederick's Appliance, they will provide service on what they sell and any appliances that you own. ABC Frederick's Appliance is located in Bellevue, right over the railroad tracks. Call 352-629-5181. That's 352-629-5181. That's 352-629-5181. ABC Frederick's Appliance.
All right, this is just getting more and more interesting. James MacManus is on the phone. His book is called Sleep in Peace Tonight. It is an historic novel, and at the end of the interview, I'll give it away, even though I'm not finished with it yet. So I'll have to download the what do you call
That's
it?
right,
The Kindle,
the
the Kindle, if it's available. James, you have definitely caught our fascination with this. How long has the book been out?
It's actually not formally published until tomorrow, actually, Tuesday morning, but it's in all the bookstores here in New York, I'm glad to say.
I can't wait to hear what the feedback is going to be once it's been out a little while. And you know what? I'm anxious to hear what the feedback is from the different generations. It sounds like you and Robin and I are probably about the same age, if you had a father who was in the war.
He was, yeah.
But I wonder how the younger people look at this era. I mean, do they look at it as a romantic? Do you look at it as a romantic era for some reason?
To some extent, yes. But I think what is interesting to me is I have children in their 20s. The young generation are fascinated by World War II in the UK, and I think that might well be the case here in America too. Because it was an epic struggle in which evil was clearly evil, Hitler's fascism, Germany, Japan.
Sure was, yeah.
And we were on the right side. It was a very clear-cut world. There was no fudging of where we stood. And as I said earlier, people in London, and I think that applies to the entire country, they had something to fight for, and that brought them together. And that feeling of togetherness is something that we have perhaps forgotten a bit. And so that's why I think people look back on World War II with huge interest. And if you look at the cinema or books, and there are so many novels and films about that era. So I don't think my book is going to be just for the older generation. I hope, in any case, it's a love story, which is for every generation.
And it's pretty exciting too. I mean, you bring real life people to life, like Edward R. Murrow. You talk about the other people that come in and out of the public eye, and also the Black Cat Club, and it's very, very intriguing.
The Black Cat Club was a real club in Soho, in London Soho, and it functioned very much as I've said. Yes, of course, I have, as a novelist, huge characters to play with, and I'm very lucky. Roosevelt and Churchill, for instance. These are huge figures in our history. And what I've tried to do is bring them to life. They both had, of course, their quirks and crudities, their eccentricities. Roosevelt would deal with the stress of high office by going off fishing in the warm waters of the Gulf for days on end, or retreating into his stamp collection. And as we famously know, Churchill would relax with alcohol. That was the thing that he, much to Harry Hopkins, he couldn't believe. Mark Hugh Hopkins was a drinker as well, but he couldn't believe the amount that Churchill consumed. I
do have more questions, but I think our listeners have some as well, so let's take a few from the phones. If you, by the way, want to call in, the number is 622-WOCA. James MacManus is our guest. Good morning. Thank you for calling and for waiting. You're on the air now with James MacManus.
Oh, thank you. This is really a privilege. Sounds like an interesting book. I'm sure that Churchill could appreciate FDR's use of somebody like Harry Hopkins, because both the president and Prime Minister Churchill were great meddlers who were always doing things outside of channels and outside the normal framework of the government. So that I like that angle of it. And I have a question for our guest. The relationship that you created for Harry Hopkins and his driver, did Did you model any of that on the relationship between General Eisenhower and his driver, Kay Summersby?
Well, that's a very, very good question, because that relationship between General Eisenhower and Kay Summersby is a matter of some conjecture, I say, but I think their relationship was pretty intense. No, I didn't use that as a model. I was aware of it, of course, but I just looked at London, what was going on in London when Hopkins arrived, and it seemed absolutely natural that this would be something that might well happen. And as I've said, Churchill and his government were desperate to know what Hopkins was sending back to Washington. So this would be one way of finding out.
So she was hired as a spy after they had a relationship, or she
No, she was always an agent all the way through.
Always had been, okay. But he didn't know that.
No, he didn't. No, he did in the end, of course. But their love survived it.
Wow. All right, thank you for the call. Yeah.
We had the privilege of knowing a gentleman here in town that he grew up there during the war. He was 5 or 6, I think, when England was liberated, I guess, for lack of a better word. And he had different circumstances that he could talk about also. But they always seem to look on the positive side, that they're a unit, they're a team in England, and they need to depend on their own selves for their own survival to get rid of the bad guys.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Is this a question to me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine, sorry. Yes, no, that's absolutely true. Mark you, Churchill from the outset of the war, or from the time that he became Prime Minister, knew that without American help, we would not win. And at best, there'd be a bloody stalemate. And so he maneuvered, with Hopkins's help, I may say, to get that assistance. And he wanted much more than Lend-Lease. But of course, it wasn't until Pearl Harbor that the Americans did what Churchill really wanted, was commit boots on the ground, to use a current expression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now the secret clubs Robin referenced earlier, was that, you said that's real. What was the purpose of that?
People had little drinking clubs in London. They just wanted somewhere to go to get away from the... It was just a drinking club.
Okay. The question I had before we went to the break was regarding Hopkins' motives. Were they self-motives, or did they have ulterior motives? Was he looking at the bigger picture as far as the whole planet was concerned? I mean, did he realize that his involvement, or was it... I'm trying to figure out if it was accidental or...
Well, this is a very good question, because Hopkins had never been to Britain before. In fact, he had only ever left America once in his life. And he knew what was going on, of course, but he was completely unprepared for what was going on in London. And he realized that nobody in Washington fully understood, because the previous American ambassador, or Joe Kennedy, had been asked to leave Britain. He was very, basically he wanted us to surrender to Hitler and do a deal. And Roosevelt...
He did? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
See, that's what I didn't know that. Did you know that, Robin?
Yeah, I had read about that. That was something that's fascinating.
Joe Kennedy was not a good ambassador. He was very, very pro-Germany. So Hopkins arrived there, and initially he was anti the idea of American assistance. And what happened when he arrived was Churchill immediately had him into Downing Street and spent almost every day with him. And it was the beginning of a one-sided courtship, because Churchill had to win and woo a man whom he knew would be his channel of communication to the White House. Yet Hopkins, on the other hand, knew he had to resist the persuasive power of the Prime Minister's famous oratory and sift fact from Churchillian fantasy, and there was a bit of fantasy in Churchill's belief. So back in Washington, the hard fact facing Roosevelt was that the Joint Chiefs were strongly of the view that there'd be no point in sending arms or supplies to a country that would soon fall to Hitler. So that was the background to Hopkins's arrival, and he very quickly came to the view that it would be in America's strategic interests to support Britain as best America could.
Really? So, I mean, so in a way, what you're saying, and this is above and beyond the novel part of this, we should celebrate him as a hero for us, because had the Nazis taken over England, I mean, that would have been one step away from, invading us.
There was no question. Had Hitler conquered England, and you can see the plans, they're in the records, He would have gone across the Atlantic to Latin America. That was his plan, and then come up that way. And so Hopkins is one of your heroes, and I hope that is the lesson that people draw from this book. A forgotten hero, if you like, and a man who's never really got his due, partly because Hopkins died in 1946, before he could write his memoirs, and Roosevelt died shortly before. So both those men left the stage without having written memoirs.
You do have levity in your book too. I like the scene at the table where Churchill and Hopkins were redoing the battle plans of Napoleon for Waterloo.
That's absolutely right. And of course, as Roosevelt pointed out to Churchill via Hopkins, it was the Prussians or of the day, Blucher, who saved the British there, which is true. Not that Churchill liked to look at it that way. Yes, there is levity. There has to be humor in books like this, indeed in any novel.
And romance. So the only person who we've discussed today that is not real is Lenora Finch. Was her name Finch?
Leonora Finch, yeah.
Leonora. Okay, so she's not real. Well, she's real, but that's not her name.
That's not her name. This is a character I've created, although it's modeled on people like that.
Okay.
I mean, the only frontline role for women in the British Armed Forces in World War II was in the Special Operations Executive, which was this outfit, paramilitary outfit, which went into Europe and created sabotage and assassination.
You know, when you kind of gave us in the beginning kind of an illustration of what it was like in those days, just the other day we had a discussion about Paris in the war during August of 1944 when they were being liberated and the Americans were there trying to get the Nazis out of there, and they were visiting brothels. And I said, they had time?
Yeah.
I thought they were fighting a war. They had time to go see women?
Yeah.
But so and it sounds, I mean, those who are better at history than I am said, yeah, that was part of what their experience was. And so it's just fascinating that
That's true.
You're shooting a tank one minute and getting out of your pants the next.
That's right.
Wow.
Putting it, yeah.
I have a copy of the book. This is really a good one, James. This is not your first one, so you're going to have another success. Let me give this one away. If you would like the copy that was sent to us, it's a hardcover, beautiful book. Sleep in Peace Tonight. Even the cover is beautiful. You're not supposed to comment on a cover, but this is a good cover.
It's wonderful.
And it is the romance that I was referring to earlier and from that song. Let me give away the book, Rob, before you ask a question. 622-WOCA, and then James is going to tell us how we can go buy it. Let me take one of these at random. Good morning. You've got the book. Who's this?
Hey, this is Charles.
Charles, you got the book. It'll be waiting for you.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
Have you had any other people that are self-labeled as historians that have had the privilege of reading your book in advance and given you rave reviews about it?
Yes, I think modestly I might say that this book has had astonishing pre-publication reviews from a number of authors, not all of them historians, one or two, published authors, well-known authors, who have read it, and on the jacket and in the inside cover you may see, if you look at the book, some of their views. So it has had a very good reception so far, and I hope that will continue.
Well, you get the compliments from the two unknown radio hosts you've been talking to as well. So
thank you very much.
For what it's worth. Thank you for being on our show, and please come back with anything you do in the future. We'll be keeping an eye on this one. All right, how do we get the book? Is it everywhere?
It should be in all the bookshops as of tomorrow.
And do you have a website of your own?
I do. It's all one word, jamesmacmanus.com.
And that's MacManus. And actually, Robin makes it easy. It's already on our website. So go to WOCA.com and you'll see it on the guest list for today. James, thank you for being on the air with us. That was a great interview.
Thank you so much. Goodbye now.
All right, we'll take a break. We'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.